Hey, Ruckus Makers. I am here today with Dr. Towanna Burrous, who's the president of Coach Diversity Institute. She's a best-selling author, trainer, and certified professional coach based in Washington, D.C. As a much sought-after executive coach, Towanna and the Coach Diversity team deliver training, curriculum, and customized diversity and leadership programs for corporate and individual clients. Coach Diversity Institute ranked number 524 on the 2021 Inc. 5000 as one of the fastest growing private companies in the United States. Towanna is a trusted partner and problem solver for many clients, tackling morale, employee retention, employee engagement, employee performance, and development. She has a Doctor of Education from the University of Pennsylvania, a Master's of Science in Education from the University of Pennsylvania, and a bachelor's degree in chemistry from Howard University. Dr. Burrous, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's so great to be here with you. It feels like the year is like in the summer already, right, Danny? It's like we're just closing the first quarter. I feel like it's August.
For sure. And where I live in Syracuse, New York, it depends. Like it might snow tomorrow, right? And then tomorrow, in 2 days, it'll be like 80. So who knows, right?
Who
I hear
knows?
what you're saying. I want to start in, if you could bring us back to seventh grade, right? You had a seventh grade math teacher change how you showed up as a student and fall in love with math. What's the story there?
Oh, I will never forget Mr. T. Mr. T inherited a very disruptive girl from the city. We moved from the city to the suburbs, and I was a city girl. And I entered this little classroom. Kind of like a disruptor in a negative way. But he also recognized the power of my influence as a negative disruptor. And he decided to put me in detention and
Mm,
said that I had to stay after class, after school, for you know, top 4 days, where I could just be completely captivated by his attention. But I'm gonna tell you something. We spent those four detention hours getting to know one another, building respect, because he needed to kind of break through the barrier that I had, the wall that I had up for
mm,
being feeling like I didn't belong. Feeling like I didn't belong in the suburban community, feel like there was no identities that looks any familiar to me.
yeah.
But he recognized I was pretty smart. And so this teacher broke through the ice, had me to fall in love with math. And we started with algebra, fell in
Mm.
love with it, and I never stopped loving math since then. Mr. T was so special to me, and he got the job done.
That's great. I could relate in a little bit. I loved math as well. Okay, middle school, high school, straight A's, and then I get to the University of Illinois. I'm not doing so hot in math, and I got my first D ever, right?
Mm,
Calculus BC or whatever it was, it was cumulative, and I struggled, right? So that was hard for me. But the real reason, I just want to share this because it's funny. The real reason I switched from math to English,
uh-huh.
there's two. One, I did this recital of um, a poem in
Mhm.
class, and the professor was blind, and he had all his poems memorized, right? The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe, and he
Yes.
loved my reading, right? And that really meant something to me. So that was number one. And I was like, okay, that's cool. But number two, Tawana, I don't know what it was like at Howard and the University of Pennsylvania, but I noticed something similar about all the guys that came out of Altgeld Hall, which was the math place, right? Now they
Yes.
had plaid on, which I am wearing. Okay, so I'm aware of that. And they had pocket protectors, thick glasses. But I noticed that all of them zero. None of them ever had a date. And so I was like, okay, I'm done. No more math. I'm going to English, and that's literally how I picked what I was going to teach. All right, back to Mr. T. You seventh grade. He sees some in you that you're very intelligent, and obviously a leader. Although you said you were being a negative disruptor at the time.
Yes.
Uh, you said he spent those detentions actually getting to know you, which I think, like, I don't remember hearing that in the intro call, and that's so wise of him to build that connection.
That's
Because I
right.
think most teachers, they just like detention and you're in trouble. You know what I mean? And some type of punishment. But do you remember, like, how do you get to know you during detention?
Yes. What
Yeah.
his first objective was to get me to understand that he was on my side.
Hmm.
He wanted to give me comfort and knowing that he wanted to see me succeed. So his
Right.
idea was to let me figure out how you think. Let me figure out what's important to you. I was very mature for my age. I grew up in the city of Washington
Right.
D.C. There's a lot of crime, a lot of drugs, a lot of need to protect and defend. And
Yeah.
so in his space, he recognized the challenge and he leveraged it because I was extremely wise, wiser than my peers in the classroom. And so our conversations were so branched off in so many different ways. We
Mm.
talked about building relationships, friendships, family situations, and I think around math, as I was practicing, math is about repetition, and especially in starting in algebra, you're repeating the same formulas again and again, and with that repetition in between, we just strike up different types of conversation. He was masterful at getting to know me and respecting and appreciating what I brought to the table, what I brought to the classroom. And once he validated me and saw my true self behind the defensiveness, uh,
Mhm.
I recognized that leadership was natural. And he showed me how. He showed me why. And our relationship continued as I moved into eighth grade. And then, of course, I would always visit back at middle school when I moved into high school. So that relationship lasted a long time. Now, one thing he did have going for him is that he had a son who was also in the seventh grade with me, and his son and I were already good friends. And I guess it just became, tell me a little bit more about that girl, Tawanna. So we had some insider tea, I guess you could say, as well.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that's great. Thank you for sharing. And will you talk to me about playing small and how you think about that concept?
Uh, Talking to me about playing small, kind of bridging off that story about Mr. T, that was an example of me playing small and not
Mm,
recognizing it. I think the fear of not getting it right, the fear of success. Sometimes, if I am successful, then I will be held accountable to succeed at this level again and again. And do I have the stamina to produce at this level again and again?
mm,
Playing small was something that was comfortable. So my opinion about playing small is meeting students where they are regarding how they view their spaces. What do they want to sign up for? What are they willing to be accountable to? Meeting them there and then building the blocks of confidence that would allow them to explore more or do more. But playing small is something I'm very familiar with. But again, it comes down to those common fears.
do you ever see that when you're working and supporting leaders through your work at Coach Diversity Institute?
Absolutely. I think, many of the sessions that I'll do, I have a slide that I call common fears. Uh,
Mm,
they typically don't associate the common fear with how they receive feedback, their willingness to push accountability because they have a need to be respected. They have a fear of not being right. They have a fear. There's so many fears. And so when you break down the common fears as you relate it to how you lead, you start to notice the common denominator, which would then reveal how do you work within that fact that fear is a constant companion. It's going to continue to exist. The question is, how long will you allow fear, that type of fear, to control
mm.
your moment?
Yeah, right. So let's talk about your work at Coach Diversity Institute a bit. And I know you support leaders in making cultural shifts. Can you talk about what that looks like when you are working with schools?
Oh, some of my favorite clients are actually the school districts, and I get great pleasure in working with educators and especially the leaders of the school systems. The work that we typically do is getting them to use the coach approach to the classroom or the coach approach to helping teachers as they design their learning for the
Mm,
students, how to better
mhm,
connect to students and helping them to increase that level of professional development that's needed, especially when the day and time where you're working harder with less resources. I mean, that's consistent in education. And
Right.
because that's a common theme or consistent theme, and you know that's not really going anywhere, what is it that you can do or what you need to do to increase engagement and performance? And it starts with, very similar to what we said earlier, is making sure you've communicated how much value your teachers and your staff bring to the classes, bring to the schools. The value conversation, the appreciation and respect conversation is something we need. I've learned that we've had to uptick when we work with educators who are in the leader's position. We've getting them to understand the coach approach is changing your language so that people feel valued, respected, and
Mm,
appreciated, especially when you know you can't do much more. There are no raises or bonuses or anything like that. What do? You
yeah.
increase the validation, you increase that support. And I'm not talking about that, corny rah rah, we can do it like a pep
Sure.
rally, but it's truly understanding that we need you and without you, but on an individual basis, what you do specifically for this team, what you deliver specifically to the classroom is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'm hearing you. I think so. If I reflect back and correct me any errors I make, but it's that specific praise that lands with people, right? Versus generic, and let's be excited or whatever. But like, here's exactly what you're doing in the larger scheme of things. Maybe even how it's connected, mission, vision, values,
That's right.
and why it's so important. Cool,
Yes.
cool. Um, so we're talking about coaching, right? With school leaders and their staff. Uh, Maybe the leader's a natural coach, maybe not, but I assume there's some common missteps and misses, right? That are made. What do you think those are?
Yeah, so we find most frequently that leaders don't when we talk to them about, oh, I'm so busy, I don't have enough time for all this individual support or
Mm,
this individual engagement. And I always remind them, if you don't have time to do this, you will never have time. And so let me teach you how to get time back. You get time back by keeping people accountable to why they were hired, connecting them to their passion, connecting them to their purpose, as to what makes you wake up in the morning to show up here every day, and tying those values to that calling or that purpose. And then if you don't do that, you'll never get time back, because then you end up load balancing what other people feel that they don't want to do anymore because they're not motivated, can't do anymore because they don't feel supported, and then you as the leader are load balancing. So multiply that by all the teachers you have or all the people you
yeah.
have in your school. Now what used to be you being 100% leader focused visionary for the system, you're now managing classrooms, helping support individual teachers or staff members who have decided, you know what, I'm only feeling like 80% today.
Mm,
That time is sucked up because you're not connecting and getting them to be more accountable by tying, like I said, tying the vision and purpose together.
gotcha. Well, I'm enjoying our conversation, Tawana. We're gonna take a quick break for some messages from our sponsors. On the other side, I'd love to ask you about uncovering unseen diversity that exists in your organization.
Absolutely.
Learn how to successfully navigate change, shape your school's success, and empower your teams with Harvard's certificate in school management and leadership. Get online PD that fits your schedule. Courses include leading change, leading school strategy and innovation, leading people, and leading learning. Apply today at betterleadersbetterschools.com/Harvard. When classrooms come alive with conversation, teachers and students both thrive. Last year, teachers using TeachFX increased their student talk by an average of 40%. Can an app really do that? Even trying something like embracing extra wait time to create space for student talk can feel like a risk. But with TeachFX, teachers see the power of those practices in their own classroom level data. It's like having a personal instructional coach on your phone, tablet, or laptop. Ruckus makers can start a free pilot with teachers today. Go to teachfx.com/betterleaders to learn how and get started. Today's show is also proudly sponsored by Organized Binder, a program which gives students daily exposure to goal setting, goal setting, reflective learning, time and task management, study strategies, organizational skills, and more. Organized Binder's color coded system is implemented by the teacher through parallel process with students, helping them create a predictable and dependable classroom routine. You can learn more and improve your students' executive functioning at organizedbinder.com. And we're back with Dr. Towanna Burrous, the president of Coach Diversity Institute. And before the break, I was asking you about uh, uncovering unseen diversity that could exist within organizations. Yeah, so how do we do that?
Some of the things that I recently, it's funny how you bring this up, Danny. I recently created a image of an iceberg. We're all familiar with the
Right?
iceberg idea.
Sure, sure.
Above the waterline are all the visible diversity traits that we typically see, race, gender. And so that's above the line. It's what's below the line that makes the difference for anyone contributing on your team. So that's
Hmm.
culture, marital status, education. It's a bunch of things that exist that you don't really discover or know until you connected with someone and had a conversation, similar to how Dr. T had with me.
Yeah.
He got to know me through who I was invisibly. Like, what you don't know, you must ask questions about. And so I tell the students in my classroom again and again that as leaders, it's important that you live below the level so that you can get to know a bit more, because the difference between as you know, covid impacted us and taught us a lot. It taught us how to
Hmm.
be ready in ways that we hadn't considered before. But now that we've experienced a pandemic, and now that we know that there are some people who suffered silently, people who have now no family members to go to, they live alone and they have no one anymore, that type of invisible diversity now exists. We have people who have relocated to places that they never thought they would live. Their economic status has significantly changed. There's so many invisible differences. And so how we communicate to someone is, one, to never assume that just because your household is great, that someone else's is that you survived COVID, that someone has survived it in the same way. That my culture and the language I choose to use casually or professionally, that my variation, whether I code switch or whether I,
Hmm.
decide to mask who I am, all that matters. And not everyone, no matter how much we look alike on the top surface, on layer one, we are still not the same.
Hmm. Can you tell me maybe like a fourth grader, like why does it matter so much, right? The surface level, you can see somebody's gender or race, that kind of thing. But why does this below the surface, matter so much?
Yeah, so I can use my son who's in
Hmm.
actual seventh grade. Now I think that's so funny. He's in seventh grade right now, and I can
Hopefully
see
not in detention.
not in detention. Um, he, as an example, the walk from the bus stop back home, you're with your
Yeah.
friends. Imagine this, you're having a
Mm,
conversation and everyone's talking about their plans for the weekend. Um,
sure.
what he knows based on communicating with him, so he's situationally aware, is that I happen to know that one of his playmates or his you know friends has a
Mhm.
challenge at home, and that the family is going through a transition. How you position your conversation to talk about your weekend and the excitement of that may be very different now that you are situation aware that someone is not as excited about their weekend. So the
Right.
culture of a single parent household versus a two parent household, that sounds very different in what you're celebrating and getting excited about. Another way is looking at it is affordability, like we talk about economics. Sometimes what a household can afford or not afford, how you have those conversations with your friends, and being mindful that
Mm.
everything that you're excited about, someone else may not be. So it's just the mindfulness of understanding who your friends are and being aware. Now, my son is very much aware and situationally about what others are going through, and he make, unlike all everyone's not the same, but he just happens to be the type of kid who wants to know how he could be a better friend and be more sensitive.
Yeah, that's a clear example. It brings me back to my childhood too. My mom's single mom and raised us, and I know it's certainly a function of privilege. We were able to stay in the house, right? And so, but the community where we were in, you know, everybody had the new Jordans. I never had a pair of Jordans, right? So that when I became a teacher, the first check I got and deposited, I went and bought a pair of Jordans because it meant something to me. But also the friends, they had like lake houses, for the summer. I couldn't even imagine. I got invited, but you know what I mean. So
Yes,
that still is privileged. I get it, but I was different than my peers, is what I'm trying to say. So
that's right.
pre- appreciate what you're sharing there. And I'm guessing part of like diving deeper too. And actually, I want to just highlight Doc Jones said something, and he said, "We'd love to hear more about how the efforts, effectiveness to create windows and mirrors for our students ties to what is below the water rather than just addressing what we see." So I don't know if you have anything for Chris on this, but I hear what he's saying.
So the idea that when when you're working with your students, getting them to listen for what they're not saying, okay, what your peers are not
Ah,
saying.
mhm,
It's training, and we teach our students who are educators in the classroom. We teach them to listen for what's not being said. So
right.
it's beyond body language. It's mostly the incomplete sentences and or the metaphors. Sometimes the use of
Mm,
metaphors will also show you the way, but there are so many things that we are typically listening for what's common versus what's not being said. And I think the way to tie it together is to think through potentially by asking questions like, I heard you when you said this. Before I misunderstand, can you please elaborate more or tell me more about what you meant here? Fill in the blank. The more we get
mhm.
them talking, the more you'll learn. We have lost the idea of the benefit of patience, being waiting for the answer to come. And
Yeah.
so we ask great questions as educators. However, we lose patience in that questioning process when we're so busy and there's so much to manage. We forget how powerful open-ended questions are. And so, if at all, look at ways to ask open-ended questions to get the definitions of terms, to understand what you don't understand by just simply asking, can you tell me more about what you mean by that? Can
Yeah.
you share more about what makes this so meaningful to you? Those types of questions
Mhm.
will create that opportunity to share.
Yeah, so the open-ended, tell me more is a great example, being patient.
Yeah.
I don't know the language you did say, but basically, why does this matter to you? That's like significance.
Yes, what makes
So,
this meaningful? What
meaningful. Yeah.
yes, meaningful, because it's in the meaning questioning, like, what makes this important to you? You learn and you'll hear fears, you'll hear disempowering thoughts or different empowering statements, you'll hear values, you'll hear all types of excitements and or disappointments. And so
Mm,
what makes this important or what makes this meaningful will create that conversation. The other thing is I tell leaders all the time how you get time back is to get people to be clear on what they want. Most people come to you expecting you to deliver the answers to them. Tell me exactly how to win. Tell me exactly how to get this done. And you're still doing the work, but they've been hired to do that and you're doing it for them. So every time I tell you how to do something, I am now losing money as an organization or as a company. I am paying you to do everybody's job. The more accountability I push out, the more the company will get a return on its investment, employee by employee. So, what would you like to walk away with if this time together is successful? A beautiful question to ask,
yep.
because then it helps you to narrow down on time or move them to someone else that can be more helpful.
Mm, yeah, that's brilliant. I love that question too. So, Tawana, if you could put a message on all school marquees for a single day, what would your message be?
Oh my God. In this time we're living in, Danny, I can't tell you how much is zooming through my head right now.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
I can tell you that if I had a school marquee across the globe, um, I would say, oh, I should not have mentioned the globe. The world is such a strange place right now. Um, I would probably say fear is a constant companion.
Mm.
Fear is a constant companion.
It's amazing you're bringing that up because that's actually the topic of an email I'm sending out today to school leaders. So thank you for sharing that. Let's
Mhm.
talk about your dream school, Tawana, right? If you were building your dream school, you were not constrained by any resources. Your only limitation was your ability to imagine. How would you build your dream school? What would the three guiding principles be?
Okay, so my dream school would be a school that is very focused on technology. As a mathematician, as a scientist and mathematician, I'm always going to be focused on what's to come, problem solving. So my school would be built on problem solving skills. I would give them skills that help them to use their hands to, whether it's craft some type of craft or farming. I would also have them be introduced to technology. So learning would be wrapped around using your hands. I think that with the idea of priorities is to evolve the student to be the best student for their next grade. So instead of just focusing on the grade you're in, I want to build a student that's preparing themselves for leadership at the next level. And so using their hands, exposing them to what's to come, problem solving what's to come, it would be the gift I would give back to the world.
Brilliant. We've covered a lot of ground today, Tawana, and everything we discussed. What's the one thing you want a ruckus maker to remember?
Oh my God, do it even when you're scared. Ruckus makers, when you're to be, again, I talk about being a disruptor. In the beginning, it was a negative thing. I became a positive disruptor. I did it scared. I did it when I was afraid. I did it no matter what, because I knew that it was my purpose. And your purpose is always going to be wrapped up in some type of fear. And so I say, just do it, do it anyway.